Alrighty, everybody. Welcome once again to another edition of Stogie411. I am here with my partner in crime, Mr. Michael Williams. How you doing today, Mike?
I'm peachy. Another fun day, another Saturday, hanging out with my partner in crime. And today we have none other than Doc Stogie Fresh with us today. Doc, how's it going?
Oh man, it's great. Like I told you guys earlier, this is usually my prime sleeping hours because I'm a nocturnal creature. But I'm up because you guys are my dudes, and we're ready to rock and roll.
Absolutely. We're looking forward to it. We finally got Doc over here to hang out with us, talk a little bit. We're going to talk about cigars. We're going to talk about Doc's site. We're going to talk about lots of things happening in the news. We won't get into politics because we know where that leads every time we get into politics. But we're going to talk everything cigar. So thanks for everybody tuning in today. Sit back, relax for the next hour, enjoy it, and we'll take it away. So take it away, Mike.
Oh, well, first question I'd say, give us some information about your site. Tell people the StogieFresh.info and tell people what you do over there and what information they can find, and give us all the details.
Well, Stogie Fresh, like Stogie411, started as a labor of love for me. I can't even remember how many years ago now, but it's been a long time. And what it's grown into is, first of all, an informational website. Second of all, a weekly podcast that, for some crazy reason, I've been doing for 424 weekly episodes now. It includes a YouTube educational video channel for cigar video. And it also includes a sister site, which is StogieRate.com, which is a free online cigar inventory software that people can use to keep track of their smokes. So all that is collectively known as Stogie Fresh Cigar Publications, and it's been just little kind of a piecemeal thing that I built over the years, and now it is what it is, and for some reason, I'm still enjoying it.
That's awesome. And I have to say, first off, before we get involved in stuff and I forget, but I remember watching your videos on when you did like your humidors and your accessories.
Oh, you stole my question.
Well, I'll let Mike ask us. Go ahead, ask your question. Go ahead.
Oh no, it wasn't really more of a question. That's one of the very first videos I've ever watched when I started watching reviews and stuff. Was I believe it was 5 parts, if I remember, 4 or 5 parts on your humidor. I remember watching it, and I remember sitting back and going, man, that guy's got a lot of friggin' cigars. I remember looking at my little cabinet humidor, and I'm going, and I call myself an aficionado. I'm not an aficionado, but one of the greatest YouTube videos I ever saw was those humidor tours, and I got to tell you, got one hell of a collection. I'm sure by now that this was several years ago. I believe that came out when I watched it. You got to have one hell of a collection now. But yeah, you were one of the first guys that I watched. So in a kind of way, I own a debt of congratulations to you and a little homage to you. Because of you, we are where we are now. Believe it or not.
Well, as you can see, this is Stogie Fresh Central here. This is where I kind of hang out and do what I do. And here over here, you can probably see one of my cabinet humidors. And behind me over here, I've got a bunch of desktop humidors. I got another cabinet over here. And I'd say just in this room alone, besides having all my technology stuff, I've got probably 3/4 of my collection in here. The rest is on the other side of the house in my bedroom. But this is where I like to hang out. It's a man cave of sorts. Unfortunately, I'm jealous of you guys sitting there smoking a cigar. As I told you earlier, there's no way in any smoke I'm creeping out of this room, and my wife would come launching in here, leaping tall buildings in a single bound, and I'm sure she'd lock me away. So it's nice to see you guys smoking, but here I am. Anyway, yeah, thank you for that. I do have quite a few cigars, and that's one of the reasons why I built my own software for cigar inventories, because I wanted to keep track of all that.
Yes, and that's an app you can get at the App Store, and I believe it's on Google Play as well, correct?
It is on the iTunes Store for iOS, and there is a desktop version of it as well for Mac and PC. And then, of course, the online version, which is free. And that's kind of where I'm heading. Is I've been trying to figure out a way of giving away the software, but doing it online, it's a little bit more difficult to get all the features that I'd like. So we're working on that slowly, bit by bit.
Nice. And speaking of, why he's touching up a cigar, speaking of humidors, I specifically remember the green humidor behind you. I believe the top of that is hand painted, right? And that had some special meaning. I remember that humidor. I could see it in the background, the painting on the top. I vividly remember that. Yeah,
that's one done by Eddie DeJong, Vandenberg Humidors in Canada, and that thing is a solid Canadian Tiger maple that has a special dye infusion that brings out the tiger stripes in the maple. And then the glass on top was done by an Ecuadorian glass artist, and he has this method of creating this colored glass in which he heats up the glass and then sprinkles pigments on it and then folds it. And then as it starts to cool, he puts it in a press so he can get different kinds of looks on it. So it's really kind of fantastic. And that really, I guess, is a showpiece of all my desktop humidors for sure.
Yeah, it's a beautiful piece. I remember it in the reviews. It was beautiful.
Definitely. And I wanted to ask now, I see things on your site. You travel and you go to like Pro Cigar and things, if I'm correct.
Yeah, I mean, when I first started this a long time ago, I befriended Jose Blanco. And you guys, I'm sure, know Jose. He's such a great guy, such a genuine guy, and he's got such a passion and stuff. Well, he called me out of the blue one day, and he said, you know, we were just talking about things, and he was saying, man, I read your website, and it's all very cool and stuff. I really appreciate what you do. He goes, when are you going to come and visit me in Dominican Republic? He was working at La Aurora at the time. And it just so happened I was in my office, and I'm looking at my calendar, and I said, how about next week? And there was dead silence on the line, and he said, yeah, next week would be great. Come on over. But what he had told me was that, you know, if you want to really separate yourself from other people that are doing the things, he said, you really need to get to the source. You need to walk the fields. You need to walk the factories. You need to talk to the people that make the cigars, talk to the people that grow the tobacco. You want to be there so that as you give out your information, however you disseminate it, you can be someone who's been there and done that from personal experience. And so that's what I started to do. I mean, that was one of my first trips, and then I made my way around to Nicaragua and Dominican Republic and Honduras and Guatemala and Costa Rica, and you know, I've met a lot of people in the process and learned a hell of a lot about the cigar industry in the process too.
Yeah, that's definitely the way to do it. I would love to get down there one of these years. They don't like me flying with my motion sickness. I kind of have an adverse effect. But
you can always sit in the back of the plane in the bathroom. We'll get separate tickets. You just sit in the back. We'll act like we don't know anybody.
They can tie me to the wing or something.
There you go. Absolutely.
But now
I can see visions of Linda Blair and projectile
there
vomiting.
You go. I got the hair. You know,
Does have the hair.
Now, with all your travels, where would you say was the I don't want to say the best, but the one place that really sticks out to you the most?
Well, the Pro Cigar Festival is great because in most times when you go to the source, you are visiting with one factory. And so you might stay for 3 or 4 days, but it's essentially just one factory, one brand that you're dealing with. When you go to a festival like the Pro Cigar Festival, you have a chance to visit many factories during the same time. So you go to General Cigar, you go to Davidoff, you go to La Aurora, you go to Quesada, you go to all these different places. And besides that, the nightlife is amazing. They throw some great parties over there with entertainment, great food, great libations, and it's just an incredible experience. So if you had to save up your money and just do one thing, the Pro Cigar Festival is really just hard to beat. But then on the other hand, you go to the individual factories, and now you can really get down to the nitty-gritty about that particular brand, and you can learn more about the history and the cigars and the people behind the cigars, and that's really educational too. But I'd have to say it's hard to beat something like a Pro Cigar Festival.
Nice. Now, do you get there every year? Do you go there yearly?
I've been there. Let's see. I went to the first 3 years in a row. That was interesting because I was in Dominican Republic at that time, and I went. This was the second time I went to visit Jose Blanco. And while I was there, Jose put me in touch with Michael Cusano, who used to do Cusano cigars. And then Cusano put me in touch with Davidoff. And I spent the whole day with Hendrik Kellner and Eladio Diaz at the Davidoff factory. And when I was there, those guys were preparing for the first annual Pro Cigar Festival. And they said, well, you're coming back, right, for the Pro Cigar Festival? I go, well, when is it? They go, next month. I go, oh, shit. So I ended up calling my wife from Dominican. I didn't want to be within swinging distance of my wife as I broke this possible trip to her. So I called her, and of course there was like dead silence on the line. And I said, well, you just think about it, okay? You know, I might be coming back next month, and it's going to be really cool and all that stuff. Of course I did, and that was, man, it was so great. And I went the first 3 years, then I skipped 1 or 2 years and went back again last year. So, you know, I've been to those factories now. Shoot, I've been to some of those factories a half a dozen times because I've been to the Dominican Republic at least 6 times that I remember. So I've had the opportunity to visit some of the big factories multiple times, and it's really been fantastic.
Well, let me ask you this, Doc. What, for some people such as ourselves, because I haven't been there, I'm just chatting with the chat room too live, trying to keep things going. I haven't been there. I know Mike hasn't been there. Give us a visual or something just to make us feel like we're there. What's the one thing besides, I mean, what's it like to walk through that tobacco field and see all this beautiful tobacco that started off from just a little seedling to where it is, and then watching all these magnificent rollers roll these cigars? Just, can you give us a feeling of what it was like to be there for guys who haven't been there?
Well, first of all, if you've never been to the tropics, that's the first thing that'll hit you. You step off that plane, and it's hot and humid, and it's just like being on a different planet. I mean, I live in California. We have great weather, but it's nothing like being in Central America. The weather is warm and humid, and tobacco thrives in that kind of weather. But as for really driving out, you usually drive to get to the factories and fields. So Santiago is the big area in Dominican Republic. It's in kind of central Dominican Republic. And you will take a drive out to the fields, and you start getting further and further away from the city. And then you come upon these great rows and rows of tobacco fields just swaying in the hot, humid breeze there. Typically, when you step off the bus, actually, when you step on the bus to drive out there, somebody throws a cigar in your hand and probably a Presidente beer, and there you are. I mean, how many places can you go where you're smoking on the darn bus and drinking cerveza as you're heading out to see this premium tobacco? So that's quite a deal. And at Davidoff, usually when you get to the farm, somebody's waiting at the bottom of the steps of the bus with a $2,000 Davidoff humidor filled with like Millennium Blends or whatever, something like that. So you take one of those, put one in your pocket, light one up, and then you start walking through the fields.
Wow.
I mean, that is a surreal experience. The factories are, it's the aromas that it's something that you can't get by watching a video. You can't get the aromas of the tobacco in the factory, and that is something that really hits you. And as you walk through the fermentation warehouses, fermenting tobacco throws off all kinds of ammonia. Sometimes you can smell that when you open up a box of cigars and stick your nose in.
Yep.
But fermenting tobacco is wow. I mean, it's throwing off all this ammonia, and it gives you this whole visceral feel for the changes that are taking place in the tobacco before they get rolled into cigars.
Right.
Really a fantastic experience.
Wow. I'm all excited and pumped up just for listening to him describe it. I'm like, man,
I know.
Drinking free cigars. This sounds like a fun time. Let's go.
Indeed, it is.
The hell are we waiting for?
And this actually led into a question I was going to ask you when you said about the conditions down there. With the hot and humid. Now, I live a stone's throw from Lancaster County for Pennsylvania broadleaf. With Lancaster County tobacco, and how do you think with Connecticut, even Connecticut, with the Connecticut tobacco, how do you think it's different to work with that tobacco compared with the tobacco that's grown down in the actual hot and humid regions?
Actually, I've always wondered about that myself because I've never been to Pennsylvania, and I know that they've been growing cigar tobacco in Pennsylvania for literally hundreds and hundreds of years. And that's what, I mean, originally that's the way it was. It was all cigar tobacco. And they only converted to growing tobacco for cigarettes, burley tobacco, back after the invention of the cigarette machine, the First World War. And when cigarettes became very popular, all those guys that used to grow cigar tobacco converted over to growing burley for cigarettes because it was more profitable. But that area has been known for tobacco for eons, where when the Mayans migrated up from Mexico and brought the black tobacco to North America, and so it's not something new. It's just seeing a resurgence in popularity. But I've actually never visited that, and you live over there. I mean, what's the climate? What's the weather like over there?
We have all the ranges. I mean, last year we had like 3 feet of snow on the ground. This summer we only had like 8 days, maybe that even got into the 90s. Humid sometimes, other times nothing. I mean, it's so. I mean, we live in an area where when you hear seasons, California doesn't really get seasons like we do. We can go from the negatives up through the hundreds in 1 year sometimes.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Then I'm sure that means that the growing season is going to be relatively short. In some of these countries, you can do multiple harvests per year because the weather is such that allows you to grow 2 or maybe 3 crops. In other places, you can only grow one crop cycle per year. So I'm sure that's kind of the way it is over there in Pennsylvania. Then there's a small window for when you can actually grow and then harvest your tobacco. And but obviously it's a combination of the weather and the uniqueness of the soil that will change the way that tobacco is growing and change the way that it's going to eventually taste.
Yeah, see, now you gave me an idea. I'm gonna definitely have to try to get together. I know I was talking with Paul Bush from Panacea Cigars, and because he's here, in Pennsylvania, we were talking for a while and about the farms and everything. And I'll have to see if I can get some inside scoop or inside information. Maybe I can get to a farm out here in Pennsylvania and actually do get some questions answered, because I was curious. I thought you might know. I didn't know that you were never over here. So that'd be interesting.
Oh man, did I tell you what? The broadleaf that's grown up there is becoming exceptional, and that's what I would go try to find out about is the Pennsylvania broadleaf.
There you go, and you're welcome to Pennsylvania anytime, Doc. Anytime.
Hell, I might have to do that. Both of us could go together, and we'll go check out the fields.
There you go. There you go. Doc, didn't you try growing some? Didn't you grow some seedlings? Didn't you try, or you did successfully? I can't remember. I thought I saw something on that.
Now, I went to a Davidoff event down in Los Angeles, and they gave us this little seedling in a cup, and I brought it home, and I'm sure it died within the first 3 hours of getting it back here. No, I've got a brown thumb. I never even tried that.
What's it like? Let me ask you this. What's it like? I know when you go on, I'm going off of seeing videos because we haven't been there. I know when you go on Cigar Safari and that, John, if they take you in, you blend your own cigar basically, and have your own cigar rolled, and then you get to enjoy it later on. What was that experience like, and what did you create? What
most of the time when you go to these different factories, they want you to get the experience of what it's like to actually roll a cigar. And I've done that enough times now to know that I suck at it, and I'll always suck at it, and I would never be a challenge or a threat to any roller's job, either now or anytime in the future. So you would get a chance to roll 3 or 4 cigars, and you make a mess of it, and then they give you those cigars to take home. Well, I don't want that. I mean, why would I want my own cigars to bring home? They all suck. So Drew Estate took a different tack to that, and Drew Estate gave us access to all this tobacco, and they said, look at this tobacco. Here's descriptions of it so you can read about it, but we want you to pick it up and feel it, feel the texture and the thickness of the leaf. We want you to smell it. We actually want you to put a flame under it and get the aroma as it burns. And you can even take and roll it up and smoke it to see kind of what it tastes like. And Steve Saka said, if you don't do any of that, just tear off a piece and chew it. Just, start chewing it.
Heard that a lot.
So then you take all these different tobaccos and you blend it, and you say, okay, I want a half leaf of this tobacco, the Viso, and I want a quarter leaf of this one, and I want 1 leaf of this Ligero from this part of the country, and all these different things. And then they take that blend after you've written it down, they take it to the factory floor, and they have real professionals roll those cigars, and then you can take them home. So now, I mean, that's a great idea. That is really a great idea. The whole concept of blending becomes a heck of a lot more real, and the difficulties in taking these complex recipes and putting tobacco together and hoping that you get something great out of it when you're done is easier said than done.
Right.
But that's a great experience.
Yeah, it really shows you the science and the knowledge that you have to make these great cigars that we have today. I mean, it's not just going in and saying, I want some Viso, I want some Seco, I want some Ligero, I want the, I just put it, it's really a science. You really got to know the tobacco and what you're doing. And that's proof right there when, connoisseurs like ourselves go and try this and we realize, wow, it's really hard. It's not as easy as people think.
And it's not like, if you're making a food recipe or something, a lot of times you blend everything together and you can kind of taste it before it goes into the oven. And for tobacco, it's harder because you have to taste the individual components. So if you're going to use this leaf, you need to know that this particular leaf is one that's going to give you a lot of pepper or some other type of spice, and that's going to be its main contribution. And this other leaf here, this is going to give you a lot of strength and a lot of body and texture. And this other leaf's going to give you something else. You kind of have to know that going in, but then it's more or less trial and error at that point. And then you say, okay, well, I want to have this characteristic and this characteristic. But sometimes when you put them together, what you get is not actually the sum of its parts. It maybe is catalyzed into something quite different. So it's not an easy process, but I was able to put together different blends, and I had different purposes for the blends. One, I wanted to be more in the medium range. I wanted to have a lot of complexity and nuance. And then another one, I wanted to just like blow my socks off with it. And so you choose the tobacco in the tobacco regions on that basis of what you're trying to accomplish.
And how did they turn out?
Actually, they turned out great. In one, I was so impressed with that the next year when I went back, I did the exact same blend, blend, because I just thought, wow, this is great. I absolutely love this cigar. And yeah, and it was a I think it was a 5-country blend, and had it had all kinds of different tobaccos in it, and it was I was really pleased with it.
Maybe we'll see a Doc Stogie Fresh blend before you know it. It's limited edition.
Yeah, I really doubt that.
Yeah.
Well,
no, I just wanted to get we're into cigars. I wanted to talk a little bit about are you still a professor?
No, I'm not. I retired about 5 years ago.
And if people didn't know, if you haven't gone over to the site, you used to be a professor. Tell us a little bit about that, and how did that help anyway in getting into cigars? Or no segue?
No, absolutely
Nope,
not. In fact, just the opposite, because for over 30 years, I was a professor of health and health science. And you would think, that's a real paradox between smoking cigars and teaching in the health profession. But, as it turns out, it gave me a really good platform for being able to assess the health parameters and potential risks of smoking cigars versus cigarettes. But the whole process of going through higher education, and I have a bachelor's, master's, and doctorate, was prepared me really well for trying to answer a lot of questions about cigars and the cigar industry and different aspects of the cigar industry. Just the whole the ability to research and to assess different kinds of information has really helped me to write some of the articles that I've written. I'm really not a blog poster. I've never called what I do a blog, because to me, blogging has always been about shorter things that you do very frequently on a kind of a day-to-day basis, more like a journal. And what I do at Stogie Fresh is really we write feature-length articles, and each one has been gone through multiple times, and we usually go through about 6 drafts of the articles before they get published. So we don't do that very often, but when we do it, it's something that's been well researched and hopefully well written.
Right.
But yeah, that's how I moved into to what I do, which is more education. Right. That's what Stogie Fresh is all about. It's more about education.
Yeah, and definitely if you want to get educated, go over to Doc's site, because it's definitely one of the most informative sites I've ever been on, still to this day. I think you have a unbelievable knowledge, and I see you're wearing a Cro-Magnon shirt, and there's another guy who I have a lot of respect for. I think is a very knowledgeable gentleman, and who I think has also learned a lot more now that he's creating his own blends. And speaking of, you said you made 2 cigars. You want the cigar one to kick you in the butt. His newest creation, is supposed to not only kick your butt, but supposed to put you in the ICU. So I'm waiting for that to come out, because I'm a full guy, and that's what I like. I want a cigar that puts me in the hospital.
You were talking about Skip Martin, and Skip is just a great guy, and like you said, he's very knowledgeable and great fun to hang around. But I met him on one of the very first trips that I did at Camacho in Honduras, and Skip. Oh, it wasn't that trip. I'm sorry. It was a different trip that we went to that I met him subsequently. But anyway, he went and blended a cigar, and at that time, he blended an all Ligero cigar. He wanted to have it really kick your ass. And by his own admission, it was a crappy cigar. But he was getting an idea at that time. This was before he was even got into his own brand. This was much earlier. But he was starting to get the idea that blending is a lot harder than it sounds. It's not just taking a whole bunch of strong tobacco, putting it together, and getting a strong cigar that's going to also burn and that's going to be tasty. So, Skip's a great guy. In fact, I was, the last couple of days I've been drinking his coffee, because they make their own coffee blend now. It's a Nicaraguan coffee, and it's great. I mean, I don't know if you guys enjoy coffee with your cigars, but a lot of people do, and I do, and it's just great to enjoy some good coffee with a good cigar.
Yeah. Great entrepreneur. A great story, too. It couldn't happen to a nicer guy. And he's been on our show several times. Always been nice to us. And great guy. What I'm going to ask real quick, I know we talked about it. We touched base earlier real quick. We'll get back to more about your site. But one of the Foozer in the chat room asked, we were talking about humidors. He wants to know, how many humidors are you up to now? How many do you actually have?
Well, I have 3 cabinet humidors, and I've got 14 desktop humidors, and I've got about maybe 6 or 7 travel and or portable humidors. So, and what I mean by portable, I mean, it's not exactly like, let me show you this one.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
This is a recent one that a friend made for me.
Nice. Look at that.
Nice.
That's nice. I like the wood too.
That's great.
And we call this a lonchero, and because it looks like
That's
a lunchbox. But yeah, it's very cool, and I would call this a portable versus a travel humidor.
Yeah. Well made too. Look at the clasp on that. I mean, that's just nice. It's made very solid. Nice. You could see it.
Yeah. It's pretty awesome. So yeah, I got that many humidors, and I was just saying on my podcast this past week that I've read sometimes some advice from people on how to maintain humidors or how to season humidors. And it occurs to me that sometimes that based on what they're suggesting or not suggesting, that it occurred to me that, God, these people must not have seasoned very many humidors if that's the advice they're given. But, you know, I've seasoned a lot of humidors and a lot of different size humidors. And from experience, and sometimes the hard way, I've learned things about humidors and know how to maintain the humidors, but certainly have enough experience with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you there. I built I have a 4x8 walk-in down here in my man cave. I have a big walk-in humidor, and it took a long time to make it, to do it right.
And a lot of swearing and cussing.
And a lot of swearing and a lot of money, thanks to my wife, who's very understanding. Especially when we bought the house. We bought the house, and the first thing I said to her was, the house had to be totally redone. I said, the first thing I have to do is my room, because I need a place to go and scream and just get it out and get it done. But, you know, I know when I built that and seasoning it and putting in the right proper humidification through the wall, I have a reverse osmosis system hooked up to mine, so it comes right off my house, so I don't have to worry about filling and all that. But yeah, it's trial and error. You know, I had to go through different lights. I had to change out lights several times because one was throwing off heat. It was heating up my humidor. And, you know, you can go online, like you said, and read, but man, trial and error is the best way to learn. That's why I'm going to tell everybody. But it's definitely nice. So Foozer, hopefully Doc answered your question. You see all his humidors. Now, Doc, we know that one's not full. Are all of them full? They have cigars in all of them for the most part?
Yes.
Yeah, because you got a great collection of cigars. I mean, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I remember, like I said, it was years ago when I first saw it. And your collection is amazing.
Well, let me say this about that. I still have the first humidor that I ever purchased, but I don't use it for a humidor because I learned the hard way or the long way about what makes a really good humidor. And that first one that I bought, it was a very cheap, I mean, it really cheap, one of those bargain basement things. Yeah. And as a result, it really wasn't a very good humidor. But I keep it around. I keep my car keys in it, my wallet and stuff like that. And I keep it around to remind me of the fact that a humidor is not just a box. I mean, a humidor has to function in a particular way, and it needs to have certain characteristics in order to make it function right. So I do have humidors that I bought because I thought they were exceptionally cool, and they are exceptionally cool, except now they're only being used to store my knife collection or lighter collection or whatever, because they weren't very good humidors.
Right.
So trial and error is definitely true, and I've learned a lot of in the school of hard knocks along the way.
Yeah. Well, I'll ask you this, Mike, before you ask something. I'm just thinking of it on the same path. We do a You Ask It show probably 6-7 times a year. Our fans seem to really enjoy it. We give them our advice, what we think, and our past experience, which we have used your video on purging a cigar. We always tell them, listen, go to Doc's site, because that's where I learned about it. But speaking of that, we always have the same question, and we always go back and forth on this. And then speaking of humidors, it's about humidification. People go beads to Bovita packs to electronics. Do you have a specific one that you prefer, or is it a combination of maybe all three of them?
Yeah, it is. It really depends on the size of the humidor, because when you get a cabinet, you really need active humidification, and that is something that's plugs in, that has a fan that can circulate moisture around the humidor, that has a big reservoir that'll last a little while in a larger volume space. So all my cabinets have active humidification. And then in the desktop humidor, it really depends on, your needs. Are you in a really humid environment in which it's more important to suck moisture out of the air? Or are you in a desert or a more dry environment where it's more important to put moisture into the air? And I found that silica gel, the small beads, are best when they're sucking moisture out of the air, and when the moisture is able to stay somewhere close to normal. Whereas if you need to put moisture into the air, then the superabsorbent polymers, the kinds that start out as beads but suck up water and expand to about 500 times their size, those are the best in that type of condition. And then if money's not an object and you don't like muss and fuss of working with refilling that stuff, then the Bovita packets work great. They just are more expensive is all.
Now, along that lines, we were talking earlier, with here in Pennsylvania, and we have such wide ranges of temperatures, humidities. We have everything here. And I've been seeing more prevalent here of late, the electronic humidors that have heating, cooling, and humidification in it. Have you had any experience with them?
Well, no, only because I really don't need it here in California. The temperature is really moderate, both winter and summer, and so I really there's no need for that. But as you might imagine, when you have a refrigerated box or tool, then it requires more machinery, and it requires thicker walls and a place for housing for the motor and stuff. And as a result, there's less space to work with for actually storing cigars, because more space is going in to the actual build of the humidor itself. So yeah, that's a trade-off. If you're in a place in which it's 80 degrees every day and you can't cool the house down, then that's what it takes to preserve your collection. Then you're gonna have to spend for that. But right. I think it could be a really good option for those people that live in those kinds of climates.
Yeah, I got lucky when I built mine, because it's in the basement, and my basement is, it's concrete all around, but my basement is, insulated and cool. It never gets hot down in my room. So I'm great with the cool. I don't have to worry about it falling below. I'm lucky with that. The only thing I ever, sometimes have an issue is when it gets really hot upstairs. It tends to get a little warm down here, but I have fans on timers in my room, so it circulates the air, plus it circulates the humidity. And I'll tell you, I've had it up for 2 years, and I have no issues ever. It's 2 to 3 degrees and 2 to 3% humidity. It sways back and forth. But it holds 68 perfect for me. I like it at 68, and it holds perfect.
Yeah. Now you can see behind me in the window, the sun is on this side of the house, and the sun traverses this side of the house. So this room tends to get warm, especially when I turn on a lot of technology in this room, because I've got enough technology here that when I turn it all on, usually all the lights in the city will dim for about 10 seconds. But so it gets warm in here because of that, and also because of where the sun is. So you can see, I think right behind me, this is a portable air conditioning system that actually vents to the outside here. So when it gets during the summer and it's just a little bit too hot in here, I crank this thing on and close the door to keep this room a little bit cooler.
Nice. See, there's all kinds of options out there. There really are. It's like you said, it's really about trial and error. You got to figure it out. Once you figure out, you'll figure out what works, whatever climate you're in. But I agree with you. It's mostly trial
I was
and
curious
error.
about those. I actually tried to get one of those units for a review unit, but of course, I mean, they're so big and expensive. You know, unless I show out the money for one, I'm not going to have one for a review. But yeah, you know, but I was just curious. And like you said, with you living in California, you don't have the wide range like we have here. And, you know, even Mike has up there, you know, with New York. I mean, he gets some hellish winters up there. But
yeah.
Anyway,
you know, one thing I wanted to say, and I forgot, I was going to mention this when you asked about whether or not my humidors are full. Almost every humidor that's in current operation is darn near full. But that's kind of one of the axioms of purchasing humidors, and that is you have to, when you're purchasing a humidor, you have to think about how many cigars you realistically expect to collect in the future.
Right.
And then triple that amount, and that's kind of how big of a humidor you need. And even then, you're going to fill it. I mean, when I bought my first cabinet, which was a small cabinet, really, really small, like an end table cabinet, I actually had that cabinet full before it got here, before I received it. Because I knew I was buying that cabinet and I knew I was going to have that space. So I started buying boxes so that I would have all these boxes of cigars. And by the time it was seasoned, the darn thing was full. And I learned a big lesson on that. And that is, you know, you need something a lot bigger than you think you're going to need. But the very first humidor I ever got, it was a 40 count humidor, which means it'll probably store about 20 cigars in real world. And, you know, like I said, it was just, I mean, you sneeze and that thing is full.
Yeah, that's true. It's totally 100%. True. I'm already in my walk-in. I'm putting cigars on the floor now in boxes. I'm like, my wife's like, you can't possibly smoke all them. But I do collect a lot of cigars. I just age them. They're sealed up. I collect the fine and rares. I collect a lot of stuff that you're not gonna find later down the road, I guess is what I'm saying. So those I don't smoke. They just sit there, you know, and then my wife's like, well, that's a waste of money. You're never going to. I said, listen, when I die, that's more money for you. Just sell them. Look at, he's got his hands up. He'll be the first.
Yeah, right. Look, get us on your will.
Yeah. Doc and I will come by and we'll just smoke them up.
He won't come to the funeral home first. His first stop will be here to make sure he gets the cigars first and to confirm I'm dead.
Hey, here's wait, you don't want to ever do this, but a friend of mine, he devised a way of calculating how many smoke years he had in terms of numbers of cigars in his humidor. That is, if he smoked X cigars a day over X number of years, you know, how many cigars would that be? And you know, he calculated that he had about 125 years of cigar if he smoked his maximum per day for the rest of his life, which he extrapolated out to like 80 something, that he would. So it was like way more cigars than he could ever smoke in his lifetime. And it was with that realization that he started to sell off some of his collection. And I feel the same way. You know, when I go, there's going to be a whole lot of cigars for somebody to smoke, and there's going to be one mean party around here.
Yeah, but that's why we do it. Let's be honest. I mean, we're connoisseurs. You know, it's like collecting coins or stamps, whatever you're passionate about, and that's what we do. I mean, with so many new cigars coming out all the time, you really can't sit there and, you know, you could buy all you want. You're not going to smoke them all. So you have to devise a way. Okay, what am I doing now? Am I aging them so 20 years later I can see what that cigar tastes like 20 years later? Or am I just collecting for something, maybe for a friend or somebody else to enjoy when I'm gone, and when they smoke it, they'll think about you. They'll say, oh, you know, hey, I remember the good times Mike and I had doing this. And that's really why I do it, you know, it's more of a passion thing. But I agree. My wife sometimes wants to hang me, but I always tell her, you got a lot more shoes than I do, so don't complain.
Now, before I forget again, I want to say, you want to give a shout out to the other people that help you there over there at Stogie Fresh?
Sure. I mean, Skip obviously is one of the guys that's helped me out from time to time. He has less time to do it, but Skip Martin of Roma Craft Tobacco, Eddie Dijon, Vanderburg Humidors. He sends a lot of audio things my way, educational things that people can listen to about humidors, building humidors, and maintaining humidors. My buddy Blake Oliver from Texas, who has done a lot of cigar reviews for me over the years. But that's kind of the core of people. Then I've had other people that have come for a time to do stuff like Christina Fontecchio of the Boss Cigars, and Rob Gray, who wrote a lot of the scientific and technical articles. Usually I try to recruit people that are experts in their field to address some topic if it's really over my head. And so a lot of people, I mean, from PhDs to medical doctors to cigar historians like Tony Hyman, guys that come on and written articles for me, and they've all been so generous with their time. But yeah, that's the shout out to those guys.
Yeah, and that's and there again, like Mike said before, that's the difference with Stogie Fresh. You know, when you know the information you're getting there is coming from people who know what the hell they're talking about. You know, it's not a guess, it's not an estimate. They know what's going on. Yeah. So,
yeah, I agree. It's definitely one of the more informative sites if you want to go to. I agree 100%. I'll tell you the truth. I tend to go there when I hear a rumor and I want to make sure it's true, because usually Doc's there. And speaking of rumors, going to segue us right into the question that we were discussing in the pre-show, Doc. We want to get, you know, and this is just three guys chatting our opinions. We, you know, if there's facts, we would say it. But let's talk a little bit about the recent acquisition that we know that it is now of Swisher Sweets buying out Drew Estates. So what are your thoughts on that? What do you see the future for, you know, Drew Estates? And, you know, I know a lot of cigars people out there are probably going, come on, Swisher Sweets. Now, is it still going to be the same quality, the same, you know, the great stuff coming out of Drew Estates that we've seen in the past? Is it going to continue now that Swisher Sweets on this? So what are your thoughts kind of on this whole acquisition?
Well, first of all, nobody knows the answer to that question because that'll play out in the future. And I have to say this, that Drew Estate has been one of the fastest growing premium cigar companies that anybody's ever seen. Yep. They have gone from 0 to 100 miles an hour in 2.5 seconds, and largely responsible, or obviously Jonathan Drew, who is a very real individual. He's a very personable individual. He's a very caring and passionate individual, and he has visions that he's kind of like the Steve Jobs of the cigar world, because he has this vision for where he wants to go, and you know, nothing's going to get in his way of doing that. Right. And so any company that can acquire Drew Estate has acquired something very, very valuable. And I also think, though, that we've seen a lot of purchases of different companies, like when General Cigar purchased CAO International, or when Davidoff purchased Camacho. Yeah. In every single case, they said, yeah, nothing's going to change. All the management's going to stay in position. And that's, true in the short term, but in almost every single case, the management does change and people do leave the organization. It just the way it always turns out. So my own guess, and like you said, it's just opinion, but my own guess is that within the next couple of years, we're going to see some major changes at Drew Estate. Yeah. And if I'm Swisher Sweets, I'm going to make sure to write a very specific non-compete clause, because believe me, if Jonathan Drew or Marvin Samuel want to leave Drew Estate, I do not want those guys competing with me in the short term. I don't care who I am, how big I am.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think there's going to definitely be a no-compete clause somewhere, because let's be realistic. Those gentlemen are the reason of that success, and they're the reason of these blends that are fabulous. But when I heard, we said earlier, I said out of all the companies, if you sat there and said who's going to buy who, that would be the last combination anybody would put together. And if anybody tells you a difference, except for Swisher Sweets and Drew Estates who knew it, I don't believe them, because there's nobody that would have put that combination ever together, in my opinion.
And on the good side of it, and I said this before too when we were just chatting before the show and everything with Swisher Sweets, they have a reach. They have a reach beyond any premium manufacturer that I know of. As the last time I checked, Swisher Sweets was the #1 selling cigar out of machine and premium of anybody. So we were talking some of the bad things that might happen, because where you find Swisher Sweets, well, our Drew Estate cigar is going to show up there, but I think in the short term, the reach, the marketing, the money that's behind Swisher Sweets is going to propel them. And it's going to all depend on whether Jonathan and Marvin stay there. I think they're the key components, because when you think Drew Estates, you think Jonathan Drew, and, that's just my opinion. Like I said, this is only a week old. It's so new. Nothing's going to even really start to come about with it for probably another year or so, until everything gets finalized, until they figure out what's going on here and there. So it's going to be a long trek, but I'm hoping it turns out to the best.
Yeah, I think one thing that those companies have in common is that they both produce flavor-infused cigars.
Right.
And with what's happening with the potential FDA oversight of the premium cigar industry, and the big question mark when it comes to flavor-infused cigars versus other type of premium cigars, and what that might mean, I think Swisher International is in a much better position financially to deal with the fallout of that kind of pending legislation if it affects the infused segment disproportionately. So, they've got the money, the backing, the political clout to be able to maybe better handle that segment if worse comes to worse.
Yeah, it's a nice backer to have for that, I'll tell you. I mean,
yeah.
Right. Hey, you know what? I'm sitting here thinking, and I'm watching you guys, and I've been watching some of your past video casts, and I was thinking about the technology that you guys use for your show, and seeing what you do with your show is way different than what I do, for example, with my podcast. I mean, you guys are you're talking with each other. You're in different locations in the country, and then you have to manage this technology, the video and the audio, and how it gets disseminated to people. And you've got chat rooms a part of it, and you've got visitors, and you bring your guests in from different parts of the country. And I'm sure you got guests on the International Space Station and all that. Anyway, you're juggling all this technology. And I was been thinking to myself, God, that would, if I tried to attempt what you guys are doing, it would scare the bejesus out of me. I mean, how do you guys manage all this technology without, taking handfuls of Prozac?
I can't talk about the Prozac.
It's easier
on air,
now, right?
I can't talk about the Prozac.
I think it's easier. Yeah, it's easier now, Doc. When we first started out, it was painful. It was hard. We were relying on the biggest problem we usually have is, and nothing against Skype because we use it a lot, is we can't control Skype. If Skype crashes, we're crashed. But we've bought our own software. We bought everything to control everything ourselves. So we're in total control for the most part, except for Skype. So if Skype was to crash, we have a backup plan. We can go to Google Hangout. Now, the chances of both of them crashing is probably slim to none unless something falls out of the sky. So we always have a backup. I could say now later that we have spent the money to buy the software, buy our own programming. So we own everything and we can control it. It's a lot easier now to control it than it was in the past. So it's not as chaotic. Time made it easier. But it was a challenge in the beginning. I'll tell you, from creating our site, which we just I believe it was last year, we had a whole site change. We redone our whole site. We try to add more things in there for the viewers and stuff.
And it's hard when you're working with video, especially and live video, to try to change things on a website because every little thing, you know, even the size of a page just throws the video off all of a sudden, you know, aspect ratios and everything else you have to think of that you don't think of, you know, if you do like the audio podcast and things.
Do you guys have like a most embarrassing, you know, moment technology story? Yes. I mean, what was the biggest snafu that you ever got yourself into?
Hands down, I'm going to answer it, Mike. I believe you're going to agree with me. Hands down, it's only when we have Michael Herklotz on the show. Michael Herklotz has been on the show twice, and both times, this is the God's honest truth, and it's not Michael's fault. It's just coincidental, but it only happens with Michael Herklotz. We've had our systems fry where Mike's had to buy new hard drives.
I had to rebuild the entire computer when we tried to have Michael Herklotz on.
Twice, not once, twice.
God.
And he's been on twice, and we were supposed to have him on recently, but he had an occasion come up, and we're going to get him back on, and we're praying that we don't have a third time. But that's the biggest snafu, I would think. Wouldn't you, Mike? I mean,
definitely. And
other than that, we have little glitches, but within 10, 15 minutes, we can get it working. The nice thing I'll say is we're able to communicate in our live chat room. So if the viewers see it, if it crashes, we can talk to them through our chat and say, hang tight, we're fixing it. We can get it fixed. And within 10, 15 minutes max, we're back up and rolling.
And they can tell us if there's audio problems, video problems. You know, they'll let us know even in the chat, and then we can, you know, if I don't see something with looking at all the different screens and everything, and it's kind of nice having our viewers in the chat room with us.
Well, I tell you, I really respect what you guys do, and we were talking earlier that with so many cigar-related websites and blogs and podcasts and videocasts and stuff, it's more and more difficult to really carve out a niche for yourself as somebody that provides something different. And from what I can see, you guys provide something really different and really cool. And for me, I take the safer road, which is podcasting. I mean, you guys get to interact with other people. I mean, think about what I do. I lock myself in this room right here, and I talk to myself for about an hour with an open mic, okay? And then I edit the heck out of that so that I can make myself sound halfway good, and then I put it out at some later time. But what you're doing is all happening in real time. It's live. It's uncut. It's like I said, it would scare the bejesus out of me to even attempt what you guys are doing. So I think not only are you brave, but you're doing a real service to the cigar community because you're producing something that is really unique.
Well, thank you very much.
Well,
that's
thanks. That means a lot coming from you. We appreciate it. It's nice to hear someone appreciate what we do. And we've always said, you know, we say it at every end of our show, we end it at the end of the show that way. You know, we'll continue doing this with sponsors, without sponsors, as long as one person comes to our site and still wants to see and hear what we have to say. And I will say this, we've had the manufacturers and the bloggers and the brick and mortar owners. We've done some live shows from the brick and mortar show places. Everybody's been great to us. We've had a few bad ones, very small, but out of that, we've been blessed and lucky. And for us, it's an honor. It's really, for us to sit down with Jose Blanco, to sit down with Ernesto Carrillo, guys that I have so much admiration for. To me, it's humbling that they even want to take time out of their day to sit here and talk with me, some guy, and him, a guy from Pennsylvania, New York. Who are we? But you're willing to take an hour out of your day and talk to us, and then continue to talk. Give us their cell phone number. Hey, call me if you have a question. I mean, that's just mind-boggling, and that is the true reason why we do what we do and take time away from our family, and that's the only reason. So. But thank you. It really means a lot coming from you. It means a lot to both of us.
Now, if you can hang with us here a couple minutes, we're at the hour. But if you're okay with hanging a little bit, I wanted to. We never even got into any cigars or anything. I wanted to ask you, what cigars are you enjoying nowadays?
Yeah, okay. I mean, I'm more than willing to continue on with you guys. This is a lot of fun. I just looked at my clock, and I cannot even believe that we've been here for an hour. I mean, that hour just blitzed by. Wow.
It does. It goes by fast. And everybody knows Doc's in California, so he just woke up before the show. He's supposed to be sleeping, so he's gracious enough to hang out with us.
Yeah. Okay, so now what was the question?
What cigars are you enjoying nowadays? What have you tried recently that really struck a chord?
Well, I'm a lot like you guys are because of the nature of what I do for Stogie Fresh. I don't really have like go-to cigars anymore because the cigars that I'm going to represent a very broad spectrum of new and boutique offerings and more established boutiques and then, larger brands. So I tend to move around an awful lot and to try new cigars. In fact, it's really more gratifying to me when I discover cigars that I've not tried before and can try them. And it just really never ceases to amaze me how many great cigars there are out right now and how many companies are producing really fine smokes and at all different price points. So I'm impressed with so many cigars. It's very difficult for me to pick out. And my humidor, pretty much represents the whole process of collecting a broad spectrum of cigars from different countries. And we're really blessed as cigar smokers to live in the current climate where there's so many great cigars.
Yeah, it is hard, especially when you review cigars and you have to smoke so many different cigars all the time. It's hard to pick it out. Yes, indeed. And in fact, and I like to smoke pipes. I don't know if you can see my pipe rack sitting right behind me there. I love to smoke pipes, but the reality is I don't get to smoke as much as I'd like because of all the cigars that I'm smoking for, the podcast and reviews and all that. And I try to smoke multiple cigars for each review. And when I do get maybe a chance to smoke for myself, I usually am with friends, and so we sit outside in the back patio and we share cigars with each other, and so then I can try something a little bit different or try something that they're providing me as well. So yeah, I'm sure you guys can understand that part of it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let's do this, Mike. We got the two questions we usually ask: the Cuban question and the kill Doc off question. We'll save the kill you off question. That's always the last question, but I'll ask this question and you can ask to kill him off. We asked lately with, everybody was getting pumped up with when the new president came in and everything, that the chance that the embargo could be lifted from Cuba, that maybe there's a chance that, people would integrate Cuban tobacco with Nicaraguan or Dominican or Honduran, whatever tobacco. What's your opinion on that? Do you think it would happen, and what changes, if any, positive or negative, you think would happen with manufacturers in Nicaragua, Dominican, Honduras using Cuban tobacco mixed with theirs?
Well, first of all, the people in Honduras and Nicaragua and Dominican Republic are already using Cuban tobacco and making cigars. They're already they're doing that. They know people in Cuba. They
Right.
send tobacco back and forth, and they make experimental cigars just to, you know, get a feel for what it would be like to take some of their own best tobacco and match it with some great tobacco from Cuba. I've smoked some of those cigars. In fact, I smoked one sitting in Jose Blanco's office. But in terms of if the actual Cuban embargo were to lift today, we'd be a long way away from seeing, you know, great hybrid cigars. Because of the fact there's a couple different factors. One of the factors would be that if the Cuban embargo just rolled back all of a sudden, a more important industry for Cuba than cigars would be the tourism industry. And they would then, companies would be pouring money into the tourism industry, and it would be creating a heck of a lot of jobs, service jobs in the tourist industry. And a lot of those rollers that are making $2 a day are going to see a lot of opportunity in going to, you know, some big chain of hotels and getting a job there for their family. So I think what'll happen is that we'll see a partial disemboweling, if you will, of the cigar industry by the tourism industry. But the second thing is that infrastructure for the, you know, for the cigar industry and quality control for the cigar industry would be a long time in coming. The non-Cuban cigar industry over the years has developed just quite a high standard for quality control, and to meld those two systems between, you know, the non-Cuban industry and the Cuban industry would take an awful lot of time and effort. So we would be a long way away, I think, from seeing the best of what would come from Cuba. And really, I have no doubt that the best would be a hybrid cigar that takes the very best tobaccos from around the world and matching it with the very best tobaccos from Cuba.
Yeah, I agree with that, definitely. And for people who don't know, it's basically the United States is the only place you can't have Cuban tobacco. So,
right.
You know, that's why, you know, when Doc was saying about that, they've already tried things. It's, you know, it's legal everywhere else. It's just the United States that it's not.
Right.
So, all right.
Awesome.
I guess before I ask this, we're getting the end of the show here. Is there anything that we did not go over that you would like to touch base on?
Well, I'm probably, but I think we should just wait and do it again next time.
Sounds good.
We'll pick it up where we left off.
All right. Sounds great.
Good.
All right. Well, then I am going to ask you the question. Our chat room has come up with this right after we first started the show. And the question is this. We're going to kill you. You are on your deathbed. What would be the last cigar and what size would it be? And once you smoke it, you're gone.
Well, it'd be the longest cigar you've ever seen.
It's got to show us. There you go.
Well, it'd be something around this size if I had to go. Maybe, you know, if I scramble, I could pick up something a little bit bigger than this, but, you know.
That's awesome.
No, I guess the experience really, you know, if you're on your deathbed, chances are you're not going to be smoking anything. But in the meantime, I'm going to smoke all the best cigars. And that's kind of why I'm not, I guess, a real collector. I collect cigars, but I'm not a real collector in the sense that I buy them for investment and don't smoke them. I'm a type of collector that will buy stuff and sometimes very exclusive and very hard to get stuff. And yet I intend to smoke one of those suckers. There's not going to be any category of cigar in my humidor by the time I die, hopefully, that I haven't smoked, because I'm simply not the kind of person that collects for investment.
Nice. All right.
That was a piece. What was that, by the way? What cigar is that?
Yeah. What was that cigar?
This is made in Costa Rica, and it's called the Eureka Gold. Don Juan Gross of Dignity Cigars had one of these made. But I visited this factory in Costa Rica a long time ago. Tabacos de la Cordillera is a factory in Costa Rica, and great people run this factory. And this is a cigar that came from there.
That's amazing.
That's crazy.
That's great.
Figured in the whole screen. Well, Doc, we appreciate you taking a little longer than we normally do. We appreciate you taking the time out. We would love to have you back on because we just touch the surface of questions and to get into your brain of knowledge that you have. But personally, I want to thank you so much for all you do for the cigar industry, for coming on our show and taking the time out. It really means a lot to Mike and I. And I want to thank you really from the bottom of our hearts for coming and doing the show.
Oh, my pleasure. And anytime. I really enjoyed this, and it's been the quickest hour that I've ever sat through. And I appreciate you guys being really prepared for this.
No problem. All right, then, Doc, we will be in touch with you soon. And thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your day.
See you, Doc.
Yes, sir. Thank you both.
See you.
All right, see you. All right.
That was Mr. David Doc Diaz.
What a great show. What a great guest. I was looking forward to having Doc on. I mean, this guy is just the knowledge that he has, really down to earth, great guy. And I'm just happy he took the time out to come out. So what another great show.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I was really looking forward to this show and to dive into some of the knowledge that Doc has. And if you haven't seen his website, I mean, it's Stogie411.info, and it's definitely worth a visit. And worth repeat visits, absolutely. Really. He does a great job.
We'll put a link up there for everybody. Yep. Thanks everybody in the chat room. It's a little light today, but we thank everybody for tuning in. Go enjoy the rest of your Saturday with your family. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Look for the promo, and then after that, it'll be I don't know who's up next, but come back in 2 weeks and come back in a week, and you'll see the promo up there. We'll tell you who it is, and that's it. So thanks. We'll see you all soon.